that was created to be combined with Moon.
Camera on. Okay, go ahead.
Let's call this meeting to order. November 12th, 2024.
Chairman Steve Dyer.
Here.
Kristen Hurst.
Here.
Brian Green.
Here.
Kyle Cook.
Here.
Mark Solonzewski.
Here. That was good. Let's pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next thing on the public comments not on the agenda. Looking around, looking like it's not a lot of comments tonight. So let's go ahead and move on to our action on the minutes. Everybody was here last meeting, right? Everybody get a chance to review them?
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve them as
The
written.
one edit that
Second.
you mentioned, so I did make one edit to the October
Which edit?
8th.
She had me abstaining, that's it.
Yeah, he was here because he moved, but I think I copied and pasted. So I've made that correction.
Oh, because you were here. Yeah.
So your motion was to approve October 22nd minutes.
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay. All right, Steve Dyer,
Yes.
Kristen Hurst,
Yes.
Brian Green,
Yes.
Kyle Cook,
Yes.
Mark Solonzewski.
Yes. All right, moving on to recommendation, application 820-5 map amendment, Commerce Boulevard. 2 weeks ago, was it 2 weeks ago? You spoke, do you have anything else to add from last time you spoke? And if you do, could you please use the microphone?
Yeah, so Tim TP with Roebling Development. I think the only comment, I don't think we got a chance to talk in between, but There were some comments about maybe restricting or reducing some of the allowances that we had. So I'm not sure it's appropriate or we have the recommendation and go through that, but I just know it was discussed. So wanted to make this comment, prior to actually hearing the recommendations.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure if there was any interest in that or
That's going to be up to the board here. but
Yeah.
Appreciate
So-
your comments. Just a reminder that we're voting on a recommendation to city council. So we all read the staff report, but does the staff is here again today? Is there anything to add or you would like to say out loud?
Appreciate it. So we were not able to attend the last meeting. I had a prior commitment, and Trevor was not able to attend either. So Trevor is the one that took the time to draft the staff report. If you would like, he can give a real quick verbal summary of the highlights, and then if you have any additional questions for him during his iteration of the staff report, we can then answer together, or again, I can defer to Trevor. I do have some comments if necessary, but Trevor's probably going to handle and cover all the things that I've got in my mind. So if that's something you would desire to have Trevor walk through it, we can do that. If you don't feel that that's necessary, that's
I
fine.
feel like since let's recording, let's hit the highlights.
Sure. Yeah, so in the staff report, that's in your packet, I call out several different items in there, but basically, to make a long story short, anytime that a code amendment like this is being considered, I as a planner look at what are the impacts that could be generated based on that change. So I'm looking at things like, does the city have sufficient water and sewer capacity to serve these potential uses? Are there any potential concerns from traffic congestion? Can the current roadways and intersections handle that sort of increase in traffic, whether it be truck, automobile, people, whatever it is? And additionally, to make sure that the proposed uses are consistent and similar with the other uses in that zoning district that's asking to be amended. After I went through the list of uses that have been proposed, I don't necessarily disagree with the applicant that what is being proposed is pretty consistent with many other light industrial zoning districts, not just here, but really across the country. However, that being said, we weren't given really any information or data that we could analyze to determine what those impacts that I just referenced may be to the city. And so that's why the recommendation that I have in there is not to adopt the changes as written, just basically because we all need more information to look at before a decision is made. And I fully understand that that is a fairly large burden on the applicant. However, this is an issue that, if changed, the city will be dealing with for some time. And so that's why I, as a planner, view these changes very carefully, because it is something that is long-lasting. You're basically changing the law as to what is allowed in that zoning district. And so with that, I have several comments in there, the things that I was concerned about or would like to see. If you all would like to discuss any of those in detail, I'm happy to do that, but I didn't want to go into detail on all of them.
So
Anything else you'd like to touch on?
Yeah, I'll do a real quick highlight on some of the items that I had, and that was the applicant, as he just mentioned, I think did request, is there any items on here that the city would consider looking at to include as a permitted use? Trevor and I did go through that exercise, and given for the reasons that Trevor just mentioned, the impacts on it, and being kind of broad, it really opened up the city from an infrastructure and congestion issue. I think traffic is the highlight of that. So there are some in here that have some less risk associated with them, but still some risk is baked into the factor. So at this point in time, we did not feel comfortable making a recommendation because I think one that we looked at was research, development, and testing laboratories. That may be one that obviously has a lower employment count or a lower distribution situation. So it was one we considered. However, there are the outside outliers that exist that may have a research situation that requires a number of employees, or it has a number of transportation and truck traffic associated with it. So not wanting to open up that can of worms, we were hesitant to give that. I also want to point out, this does not exclude the possibility of amending this in the future. I think the issue at hand here is the traffic count. We would want some type of traffic count associated with the project. Doesn't have to be super low level and granular, but something on a high level. But also, if it's more or not site specific, but industry specific, I think that would also allow the city to react differently to that particular situation. So I say that because I do anticipate us having other requests in the future. However, this really lends itself to a spec type of building being built for marketability purposes, whereas if something is very site-specific, that we can put our hands around and look at the data that's going to be evaluated with that specific industry use, knowing that it may not just be on that site, but across all the sites that would be LM zoning. However, we would be able to better unpack all of the different intensities that exist with that. So that's the only thing I have to add, and you can.
Sorry, if I may, I thought of two additional things, especially since we have some new members on the board. So you may or may not be aware, last year, after the Intel announcement, the Transportation Improvement District for Licking County did a lot of analysis of all of the roadways in this area in response to the Intel development. As part of that, one of the key intersections that came, or not a key intersection, but one of the problematic intersections that came up was the intersection of 37 and 62 in downtown. And that spun out another study that American Structure Point is working on.
Currently working through that study.
To look at options to make that intersection work better. So that's where my concern comes from. I don't want to act like I'm a transportation engineer. I'm not. I don't pretend to be. But because we have studies that have been done by professionals in recent time within the last 12 to 18 months that have identified that as a problematic area, that's why I brought that up as a concern. Because realistically thinking, any development that occurs in that area of LM, in the north part of the city, anything's going to flow south, and it has to go through that intersection that's already under strain. And so that's where my concern really lies. And additionally, the uses that are being proposed here, as I mentioned, are pretty common with other light industrial uses in other areas. It's not the Johnstown Opportunity PD anymore, but the planned development that was approved, that NACO applied for and was approved in the southern part of the city, also has all of these same uses that are being proposed for the LM district also allowed. So I just wanted to call that to attention, that it's not that we're prohibiting these uses in any way within the city, it's just they're not really allowed in this area of the city that's being requested. So with that, I'll try to answer any additional questions.
Right, I think it's no secret driving through town, everybody knows that intersection, or especially if seen how it's developed over the years. Last week, 2 weeks ago, you guys discussed that same traffic and water and energy issues.
Yep.
And then you brought up talking about, hey, maybe if it was, like you just said, site-specific. You said if somebody was coming in here with a plan in one business, you can see one.
I think then you could make exceptions, but I think even before you redefine what light manufacturing is, you may reconsider zoning it. Like, what this is different than out here, and then if it's allowed out here, and maybe you want it this, like, more on the south, like, I'm pointing like everybody can read,
Yeah.
but like more on the south side, and have it be different uses, because it doesn't make sense to try to put the same restrictions there as it would other places that maybe wouldn't have the same, like, that way you don't, like, restrict growth, but, yeah, look at you,
Well-
Vanna White.
And Kristen's right, and we have made a distinction between, let me orient myself, the zoning that is here is different from the zoning that is out here. So this is the light manufacturing district, and this is not a good rendering because it also exists in other spaces as well. However, this is a PD district zoning, which is a lot more encompassing of different and alternative uses, as you just mentioned. So your thought is perfect, because that's what we did.
Oh, well,
So, there you
good.
go.
That's the first time somebody's told me that. No, I'm just. And it may be that it's this area, maybe it's other areas, but for this, I think, and while we agree that it is an odd way that it's written, and it might have been to be more inclusive as opposed to, like let's capture everything that's there. But I can understand from their perspective, if I'm them, I want exactly what they would have asked for. Yeah.
All right, so last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about how, we would like to see every property in there sold, right, developed on, working, but we need to keep in mind.
The overall impact.
I think if we had studies on one specific, like you were saying, to where we could see what the impact is on traffic and water, it would be a little bit easier to say, let's go for it.
Still only have one industry,
Yes.
or what is it, a conditional use, or?
There's a variety of ways you could do it, and when that time comes, I'll let Trevor dive into that. If an application was presented, whether it would be a conditional use or whether it would just be an outright entitlement, which would be permitted to exist. So all good conversations that I'm sure will probably bubble to the surface over the next couple years or months, so.
Ryan?
No, I think you guys are right on point.
So anybody else have any other comments, questions, discussions? Is there anyone?
Is there a question to the applicant, like allowed to, if I ask, if this doesn't go through, what's their plan? Like, do they, you mentioned last time you're in contract, does that break the contract for you guys to?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, that impacts our interest in this, right? Because, you know, when I'm hearing some of the traffic, I mean, the existing uses, what's already happening in the park is very consistent with what we're intending to do. So you could still see the same development under the same uses generate the same traffic or issues with utilities. And that's where we have a tough time with it, because, you know, how it's zoned today, you could still run into the same issues.
I understand that. I
Representing
think it's,
the opportunity
yeah,
to bring
and
it down.
given the way it's written, because I don't know that I had like paid much attention to exactly what the use cases were, or like the rationale or the uses. Looking at it, it does seem like that, but it does definitely limit it. I understand from your perspective, it would be
We
a
also
much
want to
harder
limit it,
sell.
don't we?
We want to limit it right now, especially
Just
on
the
that
Pottery.
side of town, because of the traffic, because of the impacts, because of the different things, and encourage the growth more on the south side.
And ultimately, it probably should be rewritten.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, there's no secret
It
there.
should, like, I don't think that they're wrong. I do think that there is probably zoning boundary changes before you redefine what, or expand it up more.
I'll dance into the legal piece of this just delicately. Carefully have to work through the rezoning. Rezoning may be a different term to utilize. You could change the uses that are permitted, but to change the zoning would, in the legal terms, sometimes be considered as a taking. You're taking an entitlement or a right that's established by that property. Being that that is such a large area, there's some property owners that would obviously have
Wouldn't want it to
hesitation.
be reasoned, okay.
And so they could pull back on that and say, this is an entitlement that exists. You're taking it from LM to, I'm gonna use terms that we can all generally relate to, not proposing that this would happen, but LM to GCC one or residential or whatever the case may be. So because they are currently zoned that way, they are entitled to that. To remove that zoning designation would be a little bit tricky, not impossible, but sometimes problematic. Is that generally, am I summarizing properly?
Yeah, in terms of how this differs from a rezoning.
Yes, and then also the taking situation, to
Yeah.
just take somebody's property and rezone it without their approval is sometimes,
Yeah, that would have to be that is a careful process, and generally, if you're changing the boundaries of the zoning map in any way, it's required that you advertise, obviously legally, to get that out there. And generally, I would recommend in the past, when I've done things like that, we work with the property owners before we ever even bring it up to planning and zoning council or anything, just to let them know what is going on and get their take before you throw it in front of council and let everybody come out of the woodwork. So it's just a way to work with everyone. So it's a longer process than amending necessarily the text of a zoning district. They're just two different processes. So, yeah, I think that's something that could be discussed down the road if needed. But yeah, this is more of a text amendment than a map amendment, just to clarify the
Got it.
two different pieces there.
Yep.
All right, so is anybody prepared to make a
I
motion?
can make a motion to, to council to not move forward with the definition change.
I'll second.
Well, you'd want to go in the affirmative.
What?
Well, according to our ordinance, it says that the recommendation to council should be, let's see, that the
approve,
amendment.
deny, or.
That the amendment be granted as requested, or it may recommend a modification of the amendment requested, or it may recommend that the amendment not be granted.
Okay, that one.
Yeah.
So-
That the, that it not be granted.
I know motions are usually in the affirmative, I'm just,
You're right.
if you.
This
read
one's a little different.
Our ordinance.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kyle, second.
Would I be able to ask one more comment?
Not now, because there's a motion on the board.
Got it?
Who made the motion?
I did, and Kyle.
Second. Okay, I'm gonna do a roll call on the recommendation. Kristen Hurst,
Yes.
Ryan Green,
Yes.
Kyle Cook,
Yes.
Marcus Lewandowski,
Yes.
Steve Dyer.
Yes.
Alright. This recommendation will get passed along on behalf of the chairman to city council. I'll do that tomorrow. And then it'll get advertised and put on the city council's agenda.
So we are just a recommendation to city council, the city
Correct.
council
Mayor,
decides.
the ultimate decision.
So
So recommendation to disapprove,
to not approve it, right.
Right.
so,
So they need a five majority to pass it.
so I guess my question is, we've kind of danced around what the intent is of this property, right? Understanding that potential taking is a concern here.
Well, in this case, the taking's not a concern.
It's not.
If this was adopted, we'd be expanding the allowable uses, so that's not a taking.
So, as far as the uses, you know, utilities were presented, you know, just making it residential or some other use, presents its own problems for the landowner. I'm just curious what the direction is. You know, and we mentioned, you know, what is the proposed specific use that, you know, a developer would have?
Right,
in mind?
and I don't-
Does that get past?
And I don't want to speak for the city, but it sounds like if there was a plan to develop a certain property, that plan could be reviewed and then voted upon. But to create a plan to generalize, to generalize it, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Sean?
I think you've captured it well. To open up a more allowable permitted uses across the board, there's a heavier risk associated with that compared to a known quantity of a specific use that could then be quantified into some type of traffic count associated with it. So if you had a specific, you or any other property owner in that area had a specific use that you had in mind, we could then, as staff, evaluate it, look at the traffic impact that could be, and then give some type of recommendation to the council and to this board.
So, I mean, you know, a developer coming forth and, you know, having that interest to support from an infrastructure, utilities, basically get the site to a point where it's, you know, site ready. You know, there's that interest there, but we're not necessarily seeing an avenue, you know, as far as an ability for us to come to the table at this point. Because if it's just a one-off use, you know, it's throwing darts at a dartboard.
I think.
I don't know that it would probably be conducive for like spec building, probably, like, is what I think what they're saying is to spec build and not know what's going to go in there. You probably don't want, you want to open up the opportunities for lots of buyers. And which is on that side of town in that place is where it gives us pause because of the traffic constraints, who knows what the water use is going to be. We have to adhere to, if those specific businesses that are listed now could come in, we have to honor that. We don't have to honor more, and we're hesitant with all the growing that's going on to grow on that side of town when the growth plan is to really have it more focused on the south side.
Especially when it's too vague. You know, there's no understanding of what that impact truly is.
And if we do change that, then we do open the floodgates. It does encourage more businesses, which I'm not against development, but then we're tied, and if it impacts traffic that, like, let's say tenfold, I'm just making this up, the residents that are currently here are gonna be negatively impacted.
This is something that could be completely different 5 years down the road. You know, I mean, ultimately, right now, with the way we're growing elsewhere, like she's saying, yeah, who knows? But as of right now, that's the area that we can kind of control the traffic flow and what that does to the town and the citizens that are here.
So moving on to the zoning inspector.
Are you speaking for Terry?
No, generally, we give you guys the zoning inspector report. If there's any questions, we can try to answer those. But this is just a general kind of up-to-date outline as to what's happened in October and just kind of the numbers.
Any questions on the report? I got my trash can in, so they didn't get me.
What is the rule with trash cans?
I believe the codified ordinance gives you 24 to 48 hours to remove.
I was
your
out of
trash can.
town, got it done.
On the front of the curb, it needs to be placed back into its appropriate space. I just know it can't
Get your
remain
boat
out of the
back in
street.
after using it too.
So,
Interesting, never knew that.
I got it in storage.
You have a good amount of
County.
time.
There you go.
yeah, I believe
out
it's
of the
48
street.
hours. It may be 36, but
Yeah, you have plenty of time with it at the curb.
Interesting. I mean, that's fair. I guess nobody wants them to sit out there forever, but
I was
just
close.
curious.
I was close the other day because they didn't pick mine up for whatever reason.
I like our
"That is
trash
not going back
service.
in my
Thank you,
garage."
Teresa, for keeping them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
They are phenomenal. They take anything.
they do.
Any other questions about zoning or the inspector report?
No.
Other business not on the agenda. Looks like we have a guest today.
You have other business, Jesse?
Well, I got this letter in the mail.
Will you
If you could come up
approach
to
the
the mic,
microphone,
please, sir.
Jeez.
I don't know if you guys talked about this
meetings.
yet, about the TID project. There's public records indicate that my property's in the planning design improvement area for 3762. I'm sure, Sean, you've been getting questions about this letter. No, you haven't? So my parents got one, Josh Harrison got one all the way down on North Main. This one's for my office on 58 South Main. Steve have got one, yeah. It says that Structure Point has been retained by the Licking County Transportation Improvement District or improvements at the intersection of 37 and 62. And the public records indicate that my property's in the project area. I know you guys had a TID meeting last week. I was wondering what that discussion looked like for that project.
So Trevor did a really great segue into what that letter is about. He mentioned that there is a current traffic study at 37 and 62. It's a study funded by the state of Ohio, about $1 million worth of funds that can be associated with it. So it's a three-part study. One is to identify some potential short-term solutions, some midterm, and then some long-term. Long-term probably being, somebody shouted it out earlier, but I'm not sure who did, but they mentioned a bypass of some sort. So that's going to be part of the long-term evaluation is how do you reroute traffic? Council has put a strong emphasis on not increasing the amount of traffic that can be channeled through the downtown and increasing the lane widths to accommodate more. They have stressed that they would like to have a downtown that is pedestrian friendly and that would lead to alternative routes needing to be created in order to facilitate more flow on 62, just in a different way. So that is what that study's about.
So we're still in the study phase. That's what I figured. Is I hadn't
Absolutely.
heard
My assumption for that letter is they have permission to go on our property, and anything they damage while they're doing their study, they're gonna repair.
Yeah.
So I hope they drive on my sidewalk.
Yeah,
It's worded scary.
You said they-
It's
you have the
worded
what?
scary.
I hope they
and,
drive on my sidewalk.
and they have to make all reasonable effort, and they really need to make a great effort to notify the property owner
Yeah,
they're
they,
going on the property. They just can't be like, hey, we're gonna come peek around your garage. They have to make notification that they're gonna be on your property. I would imagine for the majority of those property owners, little to no impact for them. The bulk of that's probably gonna be in the downtown area. Now, maybe some of the side streets are gonna be evaluated as some, not for truck traffic or anything like that, but they're gonna look at just, they call them, what do they call them? Relief valves or alternative arteries that could be utilized. New Albany has done a really great job of that, or they're continuing to do that with the Market Street District in New Albany. They've looked at alternatives to take some of that localized traffic that's trying to get from, one block to the next.
Yeah.
And not the through traffic that's trying to get through, New Albany to Columbus, and replace them and have alternative paths for them to get to where they need to be. So That's just one example. All of those things are going to be baked into the study. They've just started that study, just got kicked off about a month ago, but everything in the government obviously takes a little bit of time. So they're just now sending out the letters, boilerplate letters. This is a very common letter that everybody amongst probably every study in the area is probably getting this version or some version very, very, very similar to that. They have to notify the property owners that they're going to be doing some type of study, and they may need to get on the property owner's property. And it's probably your legal background there, Jesse. It's a liability letter, just checking a box to make sure that they've done their due diligence, because there's some code at the state level that says you have to send a letter. That would be my assumption.
So my wife thought they were gonna take our whole front yard. But that's not it.
That's what the word on the streets is crazy.
So I like the,
Just a study.
I like the pressure relief valve description for traffic. I like that. Safer for golf carts.
Area is that they've identified as a project. Carts.
Probably has to be so much.
South Main all the way down to my house, I guess it doesn't go down that far.
Yeah, it's normally a set, since they're just working on that intersection, it's normally
It
like a
just goes
set
like 2 miles this way.
distance, something like that, you know.
Got it,
Yeah.
makes sense, okay.
I would imagine they're gonna have some type of, most projects have some type of, before they make any changes or anything like that, obviously would have community engagement meetings. Now that's if they're doing changes or modifications. If they're not taking additional right-of-ways or making large improvements, I don't know that would be warranted. But there's probably gonna be a public engagement component that exists with this. I just don't know when that would be. I'm not, this is a TID. We're a part of it, but we're not leading it.
So they can actually they actually can control and make the final decision on the project, obviously with our input.
So that's the fun part. No, you're good. So that's the fun part. So because it is inside the corporation limits, we really have a lot of say, if not all authority over what we are going to allow and not allow. But the project, and this is an example of governance, and this isn't a bad situation, how the money works and flows. The money wasn't given directly to Johnstown. So we are obviously not the project lead. However, the TID was the recipient of the money. They respect our independence, and our ultimate decision at the end of this has to be approval or denial. So we are engaged in the conversation, although we're not the ones that are necessarily leading the paperwork initiative and the authority of it. But we are in the passenger seat, if you will. We may not be in the driver's seat, but I would say that we're probably maybe in Europe where that steering wheel switches to the other side every once in a while, so.
Approve our roads is probably a good thing, so.
Well, I think they're taking a comprehensive approach. Yeah, midterm solutions, they're gonna look at those. Short term, I think, from the conversation, there's a variety of options that exist there. I do not want to put any of those out into space because they would all be
Yeah.
speculation, and they would make it to Facebook tomorrow,
Yeah,
and
and
then
then
that
you
would
know.
be what it is. I'll go really wild and say they're gonna put, an overpass over
Yeah.
Johnstown. That way, people will be like, that can't possibly happen, and you're right, it won't.
We're in
so.
tunnel.
Ooh, I like that. So we'll say a tunnel. Anything else? Probably gonna be some review and evaluation.
Any other business not on the agenda?
Nope.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
I just love you guys so much, I couldn't stay away.
Yeah, you missed us.